My rule of thumb is if there's always going to be inaccurate data, but if the data inaccuracy is higher than 15%, then whoever sold you data is ripping you off.
Welcome to Biz Help for You, the show that saves you the expensive learning curve by providing advice from industry experts in every facet of the entrepreneurial journey. Too many small businesses collapse. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 20% fail within their first year, and less than 35% make it to their 10th anniversary. The goal of this podcast is to change that statistic. So if you're interested in learning more to be a successful entrepreneur, tune in today.
If you're frustrated with your sales success, tune into this episode where you'll hear tips to build consistent and scalable pipeline with proven strategies to structure your outreach, handle objections, and convert leads into clients. Aidan Sowa is a founder of Zoto Dialer, a high-performance calling platform built for outbound sales teams that need speed, scalability, and results. Whether you're managing a team or making sales calls yourself, this episode gives you the exact framework to stay organized and hit your goals. So Aidan, welcome to the show.
Great to be on.
Well, I am glad that you're going to be here. I'm sure there are people who will be very interested in this topic who maybe they're nervous when it comes time to making those phone calls, or they just need to have a little extra guidance. So thank you for being here to share your expertise. And the first question that I really have for you is I would love for you to just talk about some of the components it takes to have a predictable sales pipeline that would be used through cold calling.
So the first thing is the lead list. So you want to have high quality leads. So you need to know who you're targeting, and it needs to be accurate data because so much data out there when it comes to numbers, if you're reaching out to people cold, is inaccurate. So it has to be an accurate data source. And if you're hitting the right people, like people who are actually receptive to cold calls, and on top of that, you're getting their actual phone number, specifically usually their cell phone. Unfortunately, it's like one of those things which you don't really want to do, but you have to do sort of because people don't use office phones anymore. So that's kind of like what cold calling has evolved into, that people are doing cold calls to people's direct cell phones. And it works much, much better because the average office phone usually picks up at like around 1-2%.
Mm-hmm. So then how does someone actually get information that has the accurate data? I know a lot of people sell lists and things too, but how do you even know that the information on there is accurate to begin with?
It's usually pretty simple. There's a lot of data sources out there, but generally speaking, it applies to pretty much how I approach anything. You just get a small amount, you test it out. You're like, hey, let me just try out, let me have a sample of that particular, so try out like 50, 100 numbers. And usually that's a good gauge in terms of whether data is accurate. And then from there, my rule of thumb is if there's always going to be inaccurate data, but if the data inaccuracy is higher than 15%, then whoever sold you data is ripping you off because you're wasting your time in terms of these particular calls. So I mean, there's a number of different providers out there, Apollo, Detagma. There's like so many different ones. Seamless.ai is another one. There's like a ton of different data providers which provide phone numbers. We also provide phone numbers to customers typically who come to us, for example, who want accurate data. But when it comes to data, yeah, the small data sets will do it.
Mm-hmm. So if someone has registered on a no-call list, are they included on there at all and
No.
you're potentially reaching out? Okay, good. Because I know, there's a lot of people who've said they want to be on a no-call list.
Yeah. And you definitely do not want to be calling people on the DNC, or even worse, there's the people who are the TCPA litigator list, which basically means people who are on the do not call list and have a history of suing people, because those people, I know several people who pretty much do it for a living, where they just sue cold callers. They don't do anything else. And they're able to make a living off of that. So there are people like that. And that can be greatly damaging if someone's a small business. I've heard of people who had like 10 plus employees, and this one guy who was given a call or something like that. He managed to drive them out of business,
Mm.
simply because he sued them, and he was able to take down their entire operation until I think they got taken from like a 10-person company down to like a one-person company. So it's, in
Mhm.
my eyes, that's more or less out of business. So you definitely do not want to be calling that do not call list, because that's going to get you in trouble eventually.
Mhm. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that people weren't getting information that had people on that list because obviously a lot of people have registered for that. They don't want to be bothered, especially on their cell phones. So if someone then has a list, however they get that information, and they're starting to pursue, reaching out to these contacts, like what is the best method to even reach out if it's someone that's never really had interactions with you before, they've never shown interest necessarily in your company, and you're just reaching out to say, hey, we have, this software or this product or this service, and we think you'd be a great fit. How do you even start that conversation?
Well, I mean, honestly, you don't know that they're a great fit, really. You don't know
Mhm.
their exact situation when it comes to like their budget. You don't know these things. Typically speaking, usually the what I have found to be most effective is giving value first. And what I mean by that is sometimes people what I've seen to be effective is giving out like a free ebook or a free like in the case of like public relations, like getting news articles, you get like a free article, something for free, because it throws people off. Because when you get a cold call from like a random person, what you typically expect is like someone going to try to get you on a call, they're going to try to sell you something, et cetera, et cetera. But what I typically recommend for cold calling is you reach out to someone and you offer something for free, of value, and then
Mhm.
and then you basically that person trusts you. They read your ebook, they get whatever free resource. It's not gonna like change their life necessarily, but it's gonna help them a bit, and then they'll trust you a bit more, and then they'll be much more likely to be willing to get you on like an actual call with you because you're no longer a cold lead
Mhm.
anymore. They trust you a bit more at that point usually.
Mhm. So if you have a free digital download or you have a PDF of something, an ebook or something that you're going to send to them, then it sounds to me like unless it's something that could be texted to them as an attachment, you would have to get their email address then as well too. So are they usually willing to give up another piece of information about themselves so they can get that?
They don't have to. I mean, that information usually comes with most data providers. It comes with it. So you get their name, their email, their phone number. Like it's very normal to have all of that information.
Hmm. Okay, so
Um,
then do you verify that that email is correct that's on there
yeah,
and say, I
yeah,
would love
yeah,
to send this? Hmm.
yeah, exactly. You basically say like, "Hey, I'd love to send this to you," and you basically send that offer to them. And the strategy is you send it to their email, and they be like, and like then you kind of put in like a small pitch for like an actual like what's call, and you'd be like, "Okay, like here's that resource and stuff. But I mean, I'd love to just kind of dive into it, explain some of like the finer depths of it. Like when would you be available for a call to speak about it? So you
Hmm.
provide that free resource and then you try to push for like a call.
Hmm.
That's what you always try to do. And you want to make sure that you schedule a call within a short period of time because generally speaking, if you schedule things out like 2 or 3 months later, the
Hmm.
probability of someone showing up is drastically lower than if the call's later that day, for example.
Hmm.
Um,
Right. Well, later that day seems like it could be too soon, right? If you're going to send
could
an
be.
ebook and you want to read it. But so what is kind of like
Could be.
what's considered a normal range where you're allowing them to get the information and set a time with you? Is it like a week later, within 2 weeks? Like what is ideal?
Within like 3 days.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
and the reason for that is just because people will forget you really fast. Like,
Hmm.
they just do. You have 1 to 3 days where people have like that benchmark, and after that, they might be vaguely at some point in their mind, but they're off doing other things and trying to get on with their lives.
Hmm.
So you want to take advantage of that moment, like when they check out that ebook and they have that interest and stuff. And most people, generally speaking, will read a bit of the ebook. I rarely find that people finish the ebook, but it doesn't really
Hmm.
matter. The point is you've gained their trust, and then they're willing to pay for something because most people understand that there's no free lunch and stuff. So like you're not going to give away everything for free, and they know that.
Hmm.
So you have to pay to be able to get to that like next level, whatever service you offer.
Sure. So how do you recommend somebody structure their like calling schedule so they can make sure that they're following up with everyone that they set times for, as well as making those initial cold calls to people too and fitting everything into their schedule based on the number that they're supposed to be doing on a daily or weekly basis?
Yeah, that's kind of actually like the last bit about like the number of calls. I personally don't think the number of calls, like which one is doing, really matters. It matters how many calls that you're scheduling as a result of like these actual ebooks. I would recommend calling during business hours, but the key matter is calling the right people. If you get like,
Mhm.
for example, I always say to my salespeople like who are doing like cold calling and stuff, if you manage to schedule like 5-10 people within like that first hour, you're done for the day. That's cool. It doesn't matter. You should be optimized for results. And anyone who's
Mhm.
doing sales should be like any type of cold calling. I consider that to be a certain type of sales. Should be
Mhm.
incentivized on the actual deal because otherwise you'll get salespeople who are just scheduling calls just to say, "Hey, I schedule a call," but the guy is actually a horrible fit. It would never ever buy.
Mhm.
And yeah.
So what are the statistics then that you would recommend someone see, a business owner, for their staff who's doing this, or even a rep, who's making calls themselves, to say, I called so many and this many I reached and this many converted. Like, do you have kind of some suggestions on what should be expected?
Yeah, so I would focus on it rather than total number of people called, total number of conversations, like total number of
Mhm.
people you speak to who speak for at least, I would say, a minute's time frame, because that's actually considered like a conversation. So total number of people which you speak to then, and then what percentage of those people then convert into actual booked calls, and what percentage of those people convert into actual paying deals, and and then I would also kind of break it down by niche. So if you're targeting multiple
Mhm.
types of industries, what industry is actually paying like the most money on average?
Mhm.
And then that way you can kind of dial down, because sometimes people don't even know this data until they actually look at it. Most people don't even know. Like the crazy thing is, I've asked people, what is your average like pickup rate? Like if you call 100 people, how many people will pick up? And I find it
Mhm.
crazy that a lot of people have no idea. They have absolutely no
Mhm.
idea. And you should know how many people you have to call to get someone to pick up. But beyond that, you need to have a lot of conversations. And I see a lot of enterprises, for example, where their sales reps speak to 5 or 10 people a day at max, and they think that's a good quality day. And it's not really, not if you're trying to
Mhm.
really hit quota.
Mhm. Right. So there's not really then a specific number you're saying is considered successful, in terms of a percentage, because a lot of times I've heard too, you might call 100 people and maybe close one deal per se too. Like, is that really reasonable,
No.
or should you expect higher, or like what should be like a typical response rate, I guess, if you're calling someone and having those conversations?
Yeah, calling 100 people getting one deal in today's age is virtually impossible. It just is. It technically could happen, but you'd have to be extremely lucky that that would happen. Um, so I see at Google, that's a common statistic. I see that everywhere. Oh, call 100 people, you get one deal. It's not going to happen because the numbers is like around 10% of those people will actually pick up the phone. So that's 10 conversations. And on
Mhm.
average, if you're really, 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 really good at cold calling, approximately out of those 10 people will pick up the phone. 10% maybe will actually, that's assuming you're like really good at cold calling, would actually schedule a call with you,
Mhm.
and only a very small percentage of those people will actually buy. So I would say, because the thing is about cold calls, which a lot of people don't speak enough about, is that only 50% of these people, even if you set up a call, will actually show up to the call. And that's assuming you have all the proper reminders in place and everything like that.
Mhm.
Only 50% of those people will actually show up. And then you're greatly reducing the number of people who actually sign up. So after that, then it's essentially, typically speaking, I would say a lot of people with us, for example, if you would talk about total number of calls out, which isn't necessarily the best metric, but it shows the total number of calls they're doing. It's usually around 1,000 or 2,000 calls per day per rep, and
Mhm.
that's a lot, but it's very doable with the right systems in place.
Mhm. Well, that number sounds very disheartening, though. If someone is going to be having to make these calls and hoping to get calls booked, and then, of course, have the conversation, the second one after they send something, and then hopefully, get some percentage close. And so, do you have any advice for the person who's in that position, who is, making all of these calls and needs to stay encouraged, to keep going? What do you say to them?
I would say that a lot of people are not meant to do this job permanently. I do believe,
Mhm.
like, if someone's in this type of job for like a long period of time, you will go a little bit crazy. I think this job is just meant for someone to do for like maybe a year or 2 years while they're kind of getting things together. I don't necessarily believe someone should be doing this, see this as like a full-time thing where they do this for the next 30, 40 years.
Mhm.
I don't really believe in that, but it can be a good way to make some quick money relatively easily at someone at the like remotely. So that there's that opportunity there. So someone who's willing to put in the time and stuff like that. It's it's difficult, and there's no kind of way around it. It's difficult, but the advantage though is a lot of companies use software.
Mhm.
Some of their software is not so great, but they're not manually having to type in those numbers. I mean, I do know a couple companies who literally make their employees use their cell phones. They're dialing away with their fingers, but that's like super inefficient. And um, most companies, which are like larger corporations, do use some sort of software to call their leads. So they just have to sit there and wait for leads versus having to manually dial. So in
Mhm.
reality, if you're speaking to 30, 40, 50 people a day, it's not that crazy, because if you were to call
Mhm.
2,000 people, that's like around 200 conversations. With a lot of niches, with some of the more enterprise tech niches, you might be talking to like 100 people a day. With
Mhm.
other small organizations, calling 1,000 people, maybe that's like 100 people picking up the phone, which may seem like a lot, but if the average conversation is 30 seconds, which is pretty normal for most industries, that's only like 130-second conversations. And from that point of view, doesn't seem that difficult. It's and it can be very, very quick in
Mhm.
terms of like getting those actual conversations. Most companies though, which are like large corporations, only require their people to do, like I mentioned, 150 cold calls out. Some organizations require a bit more, but they're literally only speaking to like 10 or 20 people or maybe even 30 people a day. So like that, I can't imagine that's a hard job. I mean, you're talking to 10
Mhm.
people.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So you mentioned software that makes it easier than having to dial. Is this something that a salesperson puts on their cell phone then, and it somehow knows the order, and as soon as they hang up with one, it dials another one? Or how does that even work?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's basically what we do as like a company is we have a process so that way you upload a list in like a CSV format, and it has the person's name, email, phone number, all contact details, LinkedIn, everything, which you would provide, and we could provide that type of like data as well, assuming you hadn't like purchased that type of list. But you upload that list, and then once on the back end, you would just click the dial thing, and as soon as the call
Mhm.
ends, you would pick the result of the call. And you should always, this is pretty much every dialer is like this in terms of like the result. You put the result. Okay, this person was interested, they weren't interested. This person wants to speak again, but they want to speak in like a month or two, something like that. There's all types of results, like whether the person speaks Spanish. But you put the result of the call, and as soon as the call ends, you click the result, and the thing starts dialing again immediately, and then you
Mhm.
connect with another person. And if a dialer is really good, there's different types of dialers. There's a so-called single line dialer where you're dialing one line at a time, which could take a while. Those types of people generally speak to maybe like 5 or 10 people per day. Our system dials around 6 to 8 people. And some more difficult niches like software, we dial around like 14 numbers at the same time. And the reason for that is quite simple. It's just because a lot of people are not picking up the phone. Um,
Mhm.
so that just needs to be done.
Mhm. So you talked about how conversations might even only be 30 seconds or maybe a minute or so too. So how does someone actually add some personalization to a call when they are calling so many people and they have such a short period of time to be on the call?
I would say there's several ways you can go about doing it. you can like see off of their LinkedIn, for example, if someone brings up something important, you can look that up. But generally speaking, I would say it's not so much personalization. It's a very simple answer. Volume is currently beating personalization. It's just a numbers game. Yeah, I mean, I see some people think like, oh, if I look at their LinkedIn, then I call them and stuff like that, it's gonna work out. The person who's dialing the numbers, like with some sort of software, just going through them like that, it's going to beat that person every single time.
Mhm. So don't worry about the personalization and trying to connect with them necessarily on that level. It's just, hey, I have this, item that I want to
Resource.
share with you
Yeah,
and, see if they're interested and kind of go from there. Okay.
correct. Yeah.
So what if someone is on the phone and they are encountering objections? Do they try to overcome them in that phone call? If so, like, how do they handle that if this is someone that is a cold call,
No,
they don't even know much about them?
no, I wouldn't even be talking about price and stuff like that. There shouldn't be any
Mhm.
objections to something for free.
Mhm.
Yeah, you shouldn't be trying to sell them anything. So if they've got objections, you're doing something wrong. Like if they're opposed to getting on a call, like then this, if they say one, I guess there's certain types of objections people give, like, oh, I'm too busy, I'm in the middle of something. There's certain ways to handle different types of objections. Like if someone's in the middle of something, be like, okay, I understand that, but I'm not even trying to have like a phone call with you right now. I'm literally just looking to send you like an ebook and set up a time when you are available. When would that
Mhm.
work and stuff like that? And I've seen that to be pretty effective. Um,
Mhm.
yeah,
Well, because I was thinking, let's say you call and you say, "Oh, I have this free ebook. I'd be happy to email it to you." And someone says, "Well, I don't really take the time to read, that many things, or I don't check my email very often, or
yeah,
like things like that. That might be objectives or
yeah.
objections. How do they, kind of get over that?"
You can get around it. Like, okay, well, I mean, I could text it to you, or another way get around it, be like, well, how about if we just I go over it with you, like those details on a call? Would
Mhm.
that work? There's different ways you can handle that particular type of objection.
Mhm. So if someone is pulling these lists or they're given this list by someone, is there a way maybe to kind of go through and identify which ones might be a little bit easier to reach or have someone interested versus not? I mean, again, it's a list of just names you don't really know, but like, is there anything you could do to maybe identify potential prospects that might be easier to have a conversation with than others?
No, there isn't really. I mean, there's certain type of stuff I consider to be sort of not real because there's all these like databases which are selling signals and all these things about like how supposedly these people might be more in the market and stuff. I have yet to see that those things are real in terms of like actually playing out and getting any advantage whatsoever. It's mostly just a numbers game. There's no real way to know. There is this thing called like phone intent, which essentially you can optimize. Like if you're just dialing a small number of people, and let's just say you're dialing them yourself, or like you have like a single line dialer software. There's ways you could just essentially there's this thing called like phone intent where these numbers will be dialed for you, so like you'll know exactly which people pick up. So if you had a list of 1,000 numbers, but you know like 500 of these people already picked up the phone,
Mhm.
then you're much more likely to get like a super high pickup rate in terms of like people picking up the phone. But if you have a multi-line dialer, it doesn't really matter. And right now in today's age, generally speaking, if you wanna actually be making like considerable money with like any type of cold calling, 100 cold calls a day, it doesn't really cut it. It doesn't. It looks nice. It sounds cool to tell people like, oh, I did 100 cold calls today, or I did 50 cold calls today. But in all reality, that means usually you spoke to 5 people or 10 people maximum, which
Mhm.
9 of them could have just hung up on you immediately for all you know. So that's not
Mhm.
very fruitful.
Mhm. So what about when someone does say, "Okay, please send me the resource and yes, I've, booked a call with you and I'm going to talk with you, in 4 days or something." Like, what is the follow-up between now and that 4 days? Is there anything else that they should be sending to the person to just, "I'm looking forward to having that conversation with you," or is it just, "We talked today, we scheduled for 4 days and I'm going to call you in 4 days?"
Text email reminders are generally decent in terms of like making sure that people keep interested, but it has to be something people want as well. I've
Mhm.
noticed that people show up a lot less if something which doesn't really meet their direct needs. So if
Mhm.
something is solving like a major problem in their life in terms of like they really are struggling for leads, that's going to hit their pain point more than you just selling them something which they don't really need. So it's also about
Mhm.
having a market fit. If you're hitting an industry where they actually need that service, like you can look at specific industries, you'd be like, oh, there's tons of people like run a good way to know if an industry has a desire for their services is to see if people are running Google ads targeting that
Mhm.
particular industry, or even better, have niche down like they have like a specific niche, specifically just targeting those people. Offer
Mhm.
your service. If you notice that, if you notice people running Google ads on it, then there's guaranteed to be money there. And the question
Mhm.
is just getting in front of enough of those people, and with time, they will schedule the calls. And if you have a good sales process, which is a whole other thing in terms of like actually getting people to sign up, then with enough numbers, you will get people signing up.
Mhm. Okay. Well, this has been interesting, and I know we're coming close to the end of the time that we have together. So I wanted to ask, do you have an offer that you would like to extend to our listeners? And if people want more information on what you were talking about today, how can they find you to contact you?
Sure. They can, for anyone who listens to this podcast, they can get like a 30% discount on like their first 6 months with the dialer software, if they just mention that they listen to the show. And if people want to reach out to me directly, they can reach out to me anytime over Instagram at the Aidan Sowa.
Okay. And that's AIDANSOWA.
Yes.
Perfect. Well, thank you for being a guest on my show, Aiden. I really appreciate it, and I enjoyed our discussion today.
Yeah. Thank you.
And to the listener, if you enjoyed today's topic and you want to hear additional information, you can find access to exclusive content in the show notes. Thank you for tuning in today. Would you please share this episode with those you know and leave a review on your favorite platform? And if you find our show informative, would you consider being a financial sponsor to help me continue my mission to educate business owners? A link is located in the episode description, and no amount is too small. I'd really appreciate your support. If you are interested in connecting with our guest and receiving the offer they had to share, a link to our resource page is in the show notes. Finally, if you have any bookkeeping or payroll needs, reach out to us at 310-534-5577 or contact@abandp.com. My team and I are eager to assist you. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.